This impeachment is nothing more than a partisan exercise designed to further divide the country. Democrats claim to want to unify the country, but impeaching a former president, a private citizen, is the antithesis of unity. Democrats brazenly appointing a pro-impeachment Democrat to preside over the trial is not fair or impartial, and hardly encourages any kind of unity in our country. No, unity is the opposite of this travesty we are about to witness. If we are about to try to impeach a president, where is the Chief Justice? If the accused is no longer president, where is the constitutional power to impeach him? Private citizens don't get impeached. Impeachment is for removal from office, and the accused here has already left office. Hyper-partisan Democrats are about to drag our great country down into the gutter of rancor and vitriol, the likes of which has never been seen in our nation's history. Instead of doing the nation's work with their new majorities in the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, Democrats are wasting the nation's time on a partisan vendetta against a man no longer in office. It's almost as if they have no ability to exist except in opposition to Donald Trump. Without him as their boogeyman, they might have to legislate and to actually convince Americans that their policy prescriptions are the right ones. Democrats are about to do something no self-respecting senator has ever stooped to. Democrats are insisting the election is actually not over, and so they insist on regurgitating the bitterness of the election. This acrimony they are about to unleash has never before been tried. Why? Because calmer heads have typically prevailed in our history and allowed public opinion to cast blame where blame is deserved. This sham of an impeachment will ostensibly ask whether the president incited the reprehensible behavior and violence of January 6th, when he said, "I know everyone here will soon march to the Capitol to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard." Peacefully and patriotically, hardly words of violence. But what of Democrat words? What of Democrat incitement to violence? No Democrat will honestly ask whether Bernie Sanders incited the shooter that nearly killed Steve Scalise and volunteer coach. The shooter nearly pulled off a massacre. I was there because he fervently believed the false and inflammatory rhetoric spewed by Bernie and other Democrats, such as the Republican health care plan for the uninsured is that you die. As this avowed Bernie supporter shot Steve Scalise, nearly killing him, and shot one of our coaches and 2 or 3 of our staff, he screamed, "This is for health care." Ask me or anyone if that's incitement. No Democrat will ask whether Cory Booker incited violence when he called for his supporters to get up in their face of Congress people, a very visual and specific incitement. No Democrat will ask whether Maxine Waters incited violence when she literally told her supporters, and I quote, that if you see a member of the Trump administration at a restaurant, at a department store, at a gas station, or any place, you create a crowd and you push back on them. Is that not incitement? My wife and I were pushed and surrounded and screamed at by this same type of mob that Maxine likes to inspire. It's terrifying to have a swarm of people threatening to kill you, cursing at you, and literally holding you hostage until police come to your rescue. That night we were assaulted by the crowd. I wasn't sure if we'd survive even with the police protection. But no Democrat has ever considered impeaching Maxine for her violent rhetoric. In fact, Republicans, to our credit, have never once thought it legitimate to formally censor or impeach these Democrats. No Republican has sought to use the government to hold these Democrats responsible for Antifa and Black Lives Matter violence that has consumed our cities all summer, resulting in over $1 billion of destruction, looting, and property damage. Not one Republican said, oh, let's impeach the Democrats who are inciting this, because it would be ridiculous. Many on the Democrat side of the aisle cheered them on. Kamala Harris famously offered to pay the bill for those who are arrested. I wonder if she'll be brought up on charges of inciting violence for that now that she's vice president. Should Kamala Harris be impeached for offering to pay for violent people to get out of jail who've been burning our cities down? No. And no Republican has offered that, because we're not going down the road that Democrats have decided, this low road of impeaching people for political speech. Should Republicans impeach the Democrat mayor of Seattle, who incited and condoned violence by calling the armed takeover of part of her city a summer of love? Any Republicans try to impeach her? On June 8th, the New York Post, citing U.S. Justice Department statistics, reported that more than 700 law enforcement officers were injured during the Antifa Black Lives Matter riots. There were at least 19 murders, including 77-year-old retired police officer David Dorn. Yet Democrats insist on applying a test of incitement to a Republican that they refuse to apply to themselves. I want the Democrats to raise their hands if they have ever given a speech that says, take, back, fight for your country. Who hasn't used the words fight figuratively? And are we going to put every politician in jail? Are we going to impeach every politician who has used the words fight figuratively in a speech? Shame. Shame on these angry, unhinged partisans who are putting forth this sham impeachment, deranged by their hatred of the former president. Shame on those who seek blame and revenge and who choose to pervert a constitutional process while doing so. I want this body on record, every last person here. Is this how you think politics should be? Look, we've now got crazy partisans on the other side of the aisle trying to censor and remove two of the Republican senators for their political position. Now, look, I disagreed. I don't think Congress should overturn the Electoral College. But impeaching or censoring or expelling a member of Congress you disagree with? Is the truth so narrow that only you know the truth? We now have the media on your side saying there is only one set of facts, one set of truth, and you can only interpret it this way. Now we have 7 senators on the other side trying to expel, censor, or impugn 2 senators on this side. And I defend them, not because I defend their position. I disagreed with their position. But you can't impeach, censor, expel people you disagree with. What's this coming to? In a few minutes, I will insist on a vote to affirm that this proceeding we are about to enter is unconstitutional, that impeachment of a private citizen is illegal and essentially a bill of attainder, and that no sense of fairness or due process would allow the judge in the proceeding to be a partisan Democrat already on favor of the impeachment. A sham, this is, a travesty. A dark blot on the history of our country. I urge my colleagues to reconsider this kangaroo court and move forward to debate the great issues of our day. With that, I'd like to relinquish the last moment or two of my time to a senator from Wisconsin.
Outrageous directive sicking the feds on parents at school boards across America. When you crafted that October 4th memo, did you consult with senior leadership at the FBI?
My understanding was that the memo, or the idea of the memo, had been discussed with the FBI before it got.
Did anyone at the FBI express any doubt or disagreement or hesitation with your decision to issue that memo?
No one expressed that to me.
No one?
To me. No one expressed that to me, no.
Because a lot of them have contacted us, and they said they did, Judge.
I'm sorry?
A lot of FBI officials have contacted my office and said that they oppose this decision.
Well, I doubt any of them spoke to me about it because I didn't speak to no one.
All right.
Made that
All right.
to me.
Judge, you've repeatedly dissembled this morning about that directive. For instance, about the National Security Division. Chuck Grassley asked you a very simple question, why you would sick the National Security Division of the Department of Justice on parents. John Cornyn asked you the same thing. You said it wasn't in your October 4th memorandum, it was in another office's memorandum. It was another office's memorandum, Judge. It was in a press release from your office, right here in front of me, October 4th, 2021, for immediate release. You're going to create a task force that includes the National Security Division. What on earth does the National Security Division have to do with parents who are expressing disagreements at school boards?
Nothing in this memorandum or any memorandum is about parents expressing disagreements with their school boards. The memorandum makes clear that parents are entitled and protected by the First Amendment to have vigorous debates. We don't, the Justice Department is not interested in that question at all. It is
okay, so even in that case, what is the National Security Division, Judge? These are the people that are supposed to be chasing jihadists and Chinese spies. What does the National Security Division have to do with parents at school boards?
This is not, again, about parents at school boards. This is about threats of violence.
Okay, let me turn to that, because you've said that phrase repeatedly throughout the morning. Threats or violence and threats of violence. Violence and threats of violence. Yeah. We've heard it a dozen times this morning. As Senator Lee pointed out, the very first line in your October 4th memorandum refers to harassment and intimidation. Why do you continue to dissemble in front of this committee that you are only talking about violence and threats of violence when your memo says harassment and intimidation?
Senator, I said in my testimony that it involved other kinds of criminal conduct, and I explained to Senator Lee that the statutory definitions of those terms and the constitutional definitions of those terms involve threats of violence.
Okay, let's look at one of those statutes you cited, Section 223. Yeah. That statute covers the use of not just telephones but telecommunications devices to annoy someone. So are you going to sic your U.S. attorneys and the FBI on a parents group if they post on Facebook something that annoys a school board member, Judge?
The answer to that is no, and the provision that I was particularly drawing to his attention was 2261A, which was to engage in...
I wasn't talking about 2261A. I know you mentioned that. You also mentioned 223. That's what I mentioned.
Yeah, but the only
Judge, you also told Senator Klobuchar that this memorandum was about meetings and coordination. Yeah. Meetings and coordination. Yeah. Well, I have in my hand right here that I'll submit to the record a letter from one of your U.S. attorneys to all of the county attorneys, to the Attorney General, to all sheriffs, to the School Board Association of his state, in which he talks about federal investigation and prosecution. It's not about meetings, it's not about coordination, it's about federal investigation and prosecution. Did you direct your U.S. attorneys to issue such a letter?
I did not. I have not seen that letter.
It's got 3 pages. It's got 3 pages of spreadsheet about all the federal crimes that a parent could be charged with, to include the ones you cited. Did Maine Justice make this spreadsheet, Judge?
I don't have any idea. My memorandum speaks specifically about setting up meetings, and I'll just read it again, convene meetings.
Judge, we've all read your memorandum. We've also heard you dissemble about your memorandum. I have, and the record now shows, one of your U.S. attorneys sending out a letter about federal prosecution investigation and list in detail the federal statutes for which you could be prosecuted. Judge, you've talked a lot about intimidation and harassment. Have you issued a memorandum like your October 4th memorandum about the Black Lives Matter riots from last summer?
You're talking about the summer of 2020? In the summer of 2020, there
were a lot of crimes committed. People haven't been charged for those crimes yet.
There were a lot of prosecutions, and they were under the previous administration.
Okay, Judge, what about this? It is no doubt, even though parents at school boards aren't within federal jurisdiction, there's no doubt that federal officials are. You keep saying senators. Have you started an investigation into the harassment of Senator Kyrsten Sinema in a bathroom, because she won't go along with the Democratic Party's big tax and spend agenda? That is a sitting United States senator being harassed in a bathroom.
I don't know whether the senator has referred the matter to the Justice Department or not.
You've cited as the basis for that directive the National School Board Association's letter of September 29th. Was that directive being prepared before September 29th, before the School Board Association letter was issued?
I don't believe so. Certainly I didn't have any idea.
So it was only prepared okay, I think that answers the question.
I already answered that question.
So you keep citing the school board letter and news reports.
Right.
One of the news reports cited in that letter, which you presumably mean, is from Loudoun County, Virginia.
No, that's that is not what I was talking about.
Well, you keep citing news reports, and that's the most prominent news report that anyone in America has seen. That refers to Scott Smith, whose 15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month. And that man, Scott Smith, because he went to a school board and tried to defend his daughter's rights, was condemned internationally. Do you apologize to Scott Smith and his 15-year-old daughter, Judge?
Senator, anyone whose child was raped is the most horrific crime I can imagine, and is certainly entitled and protected by the First Amendment to protest to their school board about this.
But he was cited by the School Board Association as a domestic terrorist, which we now know that letter and those reports were the basis for your.
Senator,
this is
that's wrong.
Shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony, your directive, your performance is shameful.
That's not.
Thank God you are not on the Supreme Court. You should resign in disgrace, Judge.
General Garland, do you want to complete your answer on?
Okay, I wasn't sure there was a question there, but let me be clear. The news reports I'm talking about were not the news reports in that letter. They were other news reports that everybody here has heard about, subsequent reports that everybody has heard about. There is nothing in this memorandum, and I wish if senators were concerned about this, they would quote my words. This memorandum is not about parents being able to object in their school boards. They are protected by the First Amendment. As long as there are no threats of violence, they are completely protected. So parents can object to their school boards about curriculum, about the treatment of their children, about school policies. All of that is 100% protected by the First Amendment, and there is nothing in this memorandum contrary to that. We are only trying to prevent violence against school officials.
With an economy that was strong and in the process of roaring back after the pandemic. One after the other, he implemented policies that were nothing short of disastrous. Joe Biden has been very, very good for billionaires. He's been very, very good for the elites in Manhattan and San Francisco. But if you're a young person, Joe Biden has been a disaster for you. If you're Hispanic, Joe Biden has been a disaster. If you're African American, Joe Biden has been a disaster. If you're a blue-collar union member, Joe Biden has been a disaster. If you're a suburban mom, Joe Biden has been a disaster. And it's not a coincidence that every group I just listed is moving Republican sharply. Young people, Hispanics, African Americans, blue-collar union members, suburban moms, all of them are moving Republican. It's why in November we're going to see South Texas turn red. It's been a Democratic stronghold for over 100 years. But the people of South Texas are getting killed by Bidenomics. What is Joe Biden's economic plan? Well, it turns out putting socialists in charge of the economy is really bad for the economy. And it's really bad for working men and women. It means galloping inflation. The cost of everything goes up. Cost of electricity, the cost of lumber, the cost of rent, the cost of buying your home, the cost of buying a car, and as we all know, the cost of gasoline. Every one of them has gone up and up and up and up. And what does Joe Biden do? Well, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, he just laughs away wearing his tuxedo. Because you know what? Biden doesn't pay for the fuel on Air Force One. Nancy Pelosi doesn't pay for the fuel on the private jet that takes her back and forth to San Francisco. John Kerry doesn't pay for the fuel on his private jet as he travels the world lecturing everyone that they need to consume less. If you're a senior citizen right now and you're on a fixed income, every single bill you face has gone up. If you're a single mom with 3 or 4 kids, working a couple of jobs, all of your costs have gone up. If you're a dad trying to think about, all right, how do we afford braces for our 14-year-old? All of those prices have gone up. And there is a cause and effect. When you spend trillions of dollars, when you borrow trillions of dollars, when you print money like it's going out of style, and when you combine that with an assault from regulators shutting down businesses, ordering shutdowns, assaulting energy production, oil and gas production in the United States, which drives the cost of energy up for everyone, which drives the cost of everything else up for everyone. And then when you put in place a cabinet that is AWOL, the Secretary of Transportation, in the middle of the greatest supply chain crisis of our lives, went on paternity leave and was nowhere to be found. 2 years ago, most people didn't know much about our supply chain, didn't ever really focus on the fact that we had a supply chain until Biden and the socialists came in and screwed it up. And the people who are hurting as working men and women. We know we can do better under President Trump. We cut taxes, we cut regulations, and we saw the lowest unemployment in 50 years. We saw the lowest African American unemployment ever recorded. We saw the lowest Hispanic unemployment ever recorded. We saw the lowest unemployment for young people in 70 years. We saw the lowest unemployment for women in 70 years. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Socialists and the Democratic Party took all of that and screwed it up. And the working men and women of America are paying the price.
Okay, we've got time for a couple of quick questions. Yeah.
You laid out all the ways you blame Democrats.
From Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, we learned last week that the Department of Homeland Security has established a Ministry of Truth. They're calling it the Disinformation Governance Board. How Orwellian. Now, the details are scarce of this effort, but one would assume that the DHS Intelligence and Analysis would be part of that effort. The nominee being considered today was one of the architects of George W. Bush's administration bulk metadata collection at the NSA. What a great recommendation for him, sarcasm included, which gathered the private electronic communications of millions of Americans without warrant. Is this someone we would want to be involved in Biden administration's new Ministry of Truth? I will not provide my consent to expanding the surveillance state and the suppression of First and Fourth Amendment rights of Americans. I oppose this nominee and object.
The objection is heard.